Hey everybody, welcome back. You clicked on the title, so you know exactly what we're talking about. Today it's going to be the M1 MacBook Pro. It is roughly 10 months old, so it's nearing its first birthday. And we just kind of wanted to know, how is it holding up after everyday use over the last 10 months? And yes, I can full-heartedly talk about this because I got this computer on launch day. Let's get into it. Now, in the spirit of transparency, I am going to let you know that this whole video is not going to be scripted in any way, shape, or form. I promise you that. I tried working on a script for this one, as I do for most of my videos. It just came out sounding way too robotic, and I felt that considering I wanted to talk about how strong this computer is and some of its little weaknesses, I really wanted to speak from the heart on it. So just you got that out of the way, let's keep going. So I am going to start off with the cons, or the things that I considered to be a little bit kind of a letdown with this MacBook. One thing to note before we get into it is that the MacBook Pro that I use, the M1 MacBook Pro, is the base model unit. I didn't get any type of upgrades. I didn't get any fancy shininess to it. It's just straight up the base model 256 gig MacBook Pro. Nothing too crazy about it. The cons, at least on this particular unit, is the fact that it only has 2 USB-C ports. Now, it's not necessarily the end of the world. There's a quick workaround simply by just venturing over to Amazon and getting yourself a little USB hub. The one that I got slides into both USB-C ports, and it gives me 2 USB-C ports, but I also get a couple of A ports. I get SD card slot, micro SD card slot, HDMI out. So it gives me anything and everything that I would need. It's just, I guess you're part of the dongle club at that point. So it's a fairly easy workaround, and there weren't really any other cons that I could come up with. I do find that it will lag a little bit with some of the more intensive stuff, but not even to a point where the whole thing will lock up. It literally just kind of stagger or stutter for 3 to 4 seconds, like nothing too crazy. Yeah, that's pretty much it. In terms of the pros, the power and speed, like by now, I don't even need to go over the specs as I normally would with one of these, how's it doing X months down the line kind of videos. But I mean, everybody knows what's in these things, and the M1 processor is just an absolute powerhouse. So I'll give you a little bit of a comparison. Unfortunately, I have nothing to flash up on screen, so you're just gonna have to take me at my word for this one. When I had my Intel MacBook Pro, before I had this one sitting behind me for studio prop purposes, it would take me roughly 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes up to an hour, to render even my simple little videos that I pop here on YouTube. And if you've been subscribed or following me for a little while, my videos on average are anywhere between 7 to 12 minutes, and I mean almost an hour to render one of those. And now with my M1 MacBook Pro, even with some of my videos that are gradually becoming a little bit more detailed, the same duration of video I can have rendered in 10 to 15 minutes. Like that's really impressive. For the sake of this video, actually, I even created like a brand new intro. There's going to be a slightly different outro as well, and all of the animations and everything I create myself right on the MacBook Pro, and it's able to do everything very fast, very seamlessly. The fans have never had to turn on. It doesn't generate heat at all. Why do I stutter so much? Basically what I'm trying to get at is that the power and the speed of the M1 processor, I believe, is unmatched, at least in any devices that I've used. All right, the battery life. So again, if you've been following me for a bit, battery life is very important to me. I rag on it on certain phones, ragged on it a little bit with the Nintendo Switch if I remember correctly. I can't remember if I actually put that in the video, but I had a few choice words for it. Basically, battery life is definitely important to me, especially if you're going to be using it on the go, as I do all the time with my MacBook. So if I were to tell you anything about battery life on the MacBook Pro, it's that I use it every single day, hours on end, sometimes 3-4 hours, and I really only ever have to charge it once a week. Unheard of for a MacBook, right? And that's just, again, that's speaking to the power efficiency of the M1 processor. We can see that in the iPad Pro, the new ones that had come out, for instance. I think I even talked about it in my iPad Pro video. I'll link it right here if you have any interest in watching that. But the battery life is just incredible on anything that has an M1 inside of it. Now, if you want to talk about workflow, because we already talked about power and speed, and we talked about battery and its longevity. The keyboard the keyboard was improved as well. So in case you weren't aware, the previous MacBooks, the Pro and the Air, had a different style of switching mechanism underneath the keys on the keyboard. I won't go super in depth with that because I really don't want to, drag this out too long. But essentially, Apple improved that. So you have better travel on the key. You have a little bit more of a tactile resistance to it as well, and it just makes typing feel better. Now, I know it's kind of strange talking about a keyboard in terms of, affecting workflow and just because of the key travel in itself, but really it does make a difference. You find yourself making less mistakes or feeling like you're making less mistakes as well. And then that makes a huge difference, especially in terms of productivity. And then the aesthetic. I would consider the aesthetic to be a pro. Now, the thing is that the aesthetic on the MacBook Pro hasn't changed in a couple of years, but the thing is that it doesn't need to. We are seeing a lot of rumors about a design change coming with the new MacBooks, and I'm sure it is coming. I'm absolutely sure that it's coming. But the slightly rounded top and bottom that you get on the current MacBooks with the squared off edges, honestly, I really do like that. It doesn't really make it any, easier or harder to hold or anything. It feels nicer. Now, I normally have a case on my MacBook because I do bring it with me in a lot of different places. And if I were to drop said MacBook, I would be quite pissed. So I've decided that, I'm going to put a case on it, but if I ever take that case off and I just feel the aesthetic of the MacBook, it is very nice. And then kind of like a neutral feeling that I have about the MacBook Pro is the touch bar. I know this is going to get some reactions. So the touch bar... What do I say about the touch bar? The touch bar was a good idea. It's definitely not utilized as much as it could be. Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there that really don't like the touch bar. You get your two camps, the ones that are like super into it, and then the ones that are like, meh. But me, I would say I'm pretty safely in the middle on that one. I neither love it nor hate it. I just feel like it has a lot more potential to do various things that, Apple just really isn't doing with it. I would say the most common use case scenario for myself is just, quick autocorrect. And that's it. I don't really ever do much else with it. Everything else is built into the control center now. So, it's kind of killed the touch bar. Now, in terms of overall value, I do find that I really did get what I paid for this time around. The Intel MacBook Pro, when I purchased it, was the exact same cost as the M1 MacBook Pro, and I feel like with the M1, you get a lot more computing power for that exact same cost. So if you have a MacBook that is running a little slow or is a couple years old and you're kind of considering getting a new one, the current generation M1 MacBook Pro would be a phenomenal purchase for you. But as per usual in the tech industry is that we are seeing a lot of rumors of the M1X or M2 Apple Silicon processor MacBooks that are going to be coming out either, later this year or sometime next year. It was even teased, or rather leaked-ish, that we were going to see a keynote for it earlier this year, and we all know how that turned out. So yeah, I will say that it's an absolutely phenomenal computer. Again, just to recap, the only cons that I was really able to come across were the lack of ports. But again, super easy workaround for something like that. All right, so if you hung in this long, I love you for it. The structure was a little bit different, not having any script. But again, I really wanted to speak from the heart on this one. Let me know in the comments if you have the M1 MacBook Pro or even the M1 MacBook Air. And on the other hand, if you have absolutely zero intention on getting one, the comment section is open for you too, because I'd be curious to know your take on that. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up. And if you love this kind of content, please consider subscribing so you can help me build this channel into something huge. You take care. I'll see you in the next one.